This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on. Get on. Welcome to the best 15 minutes or so in the universe. It's Beyond a Reasonable Doubt.
BRD, or somebody said BARD, Bard, which I kind of, it's grown on me because, you know, the Bard and Shakespeare, the Bard, and then Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. And today, are you in Ukraine mode? Are you in legal mode? Are you in car mode?
I'm kind of burnt out on Ukraine.
Yeah,
so,
it's become
let's go legal mode.
Yeah, it's kind of my feeling. The only legal issue that I saw today that interested me about Ukraine, we'll just tease for Thursday, which is the legality of foreign fighters going there. So we'll deal with that later. I'm more interested in some other stuff, not the least of which is, you know, we've talked about Alec Baldwin a number of times. And did you see this week, maybe yesterday, I saw something that his lawyer filed, and I've been wondering who was his lawyer, and it turns out it's the firm is Quinn Emanuel. I know John. I've known John for a lot of years. I've used them, actually. And it turns out that they're now trying to say that he's indemnified by the contract that was
as a producer. His contract as a producer precludes him from being liable, is what they're claiming.
Right, which I understand, but once again, while the criminal is still pending the investigation, and I hate to give unsolicited advice, but I'm going to give unsolicited advice, I don't think that's a great look. And I will tell you why. You've got a sheriff there, you've got a DA there, and the sheriff and the DA are going to start, you know, for whether you like it or not, prosecutors listen to which way the wind is blowing in public opinion. And if you're taking the position that you have no liability and you're insulated, basically, or immune from it, that would tend to, for the same reasons in his interview that you and I were talking about, where we kind of presciently said he's really going to piss off the husband of the deceased, which sure enough, it came out and he did. This tends to, remember, they listen, and prosecutors, when they make a decision, always take into account what the kind of collateral damage the people who are left in the wake say. And this just may kind of light a fuse, if you know what I mean. And I don't know why people say, well, Mark, what's the alternative? He's just defending it. Yeah, maybe stay the action temporarily until after the criminal, and you say, look, Judge, we can't answer, we can't take a position, we want to freeze everything and press pause?
So basically, you're being accused of parking in a handicap zone, and you're saying, I didn't park in that handicap zone, but I have diplomatic plates anyway, so there's nothing you can do. And so by hearing that, I mean, I think when lay people hear that, they go, well, maybe he did park in that handicap zone because he's saying I have diplomatic. Well, why would he say that if he didn't, in fact, park in the handicap spot? And is that basically what you're saying?
There's an analogy there because he's claiming, and by the way, if he had parked in a handicap zone after running somebody over who was in the crosswalk walking against the red, and you said, or was not in a crosswalk. There's actually cases I've had over the years where they hit somebody and then the defense is, well, they weren't in a marked crosswalk. And I always say, well, does that give you a free pass to just kind of run them over? And this person could say, well, I've got diplomatic immunity, but well, is your diplomatic immunity or your get out of jail card, does that have are there ramifications based on an act that has nothing to do with your diplomatic status?
Right. So if you were handling this case, you would not jump to the I cannot be tried or prosecuted for this because of X, Y, and Z. And, oh, by the way, I didn't do it.
I love to second guess, and I'm doing that. I shouldn't say I love to because I get pissed when people do it in my cases. But he never should have done the interview. Somebody should have sat on him and just said, you do the interview, that's fine. I'm not going to be your lawyer. By the way, Harlan Braun did that with Robert Blake. I've known other lawyers who've done it.
They dropped Blake.
They dropped Blake. And I understand it, and Blake was acquitted, and so he could say, well, you dropped me, too bad. You could have been the guy standing next to me when I got acquitted. But look, at a certain point, this just inflames, in my humble opinion, not only the husband of the deceased, who is going to be the point person when that prosecutor and that sheriff make a decision, they are going to have to run that decision by that gentleman. And when they run that decision by that gentleman has already retained a very able lawyer in Brian Panish, and Brian knows, from where he comes and how this plays out. And it's not I'm just telling you, I don't understand it. I would have just moved to stay, and I would have said, you're not going down this road.
Is he on commission?
He's on a contingency.
Contingency?
Yeah.
You know that.
Well, I would bet a lot of money on that. This is a case that traditionally is going to be a contingency.
Right, because there seems to be, whether he's found guilty in the court system, there's still a nice payday out there.
This is a case where, with Brian helming it, if I'm going to speculate, I would say this is a $15 million, $20 million end of the...
So someone offers you $9 million right now?
No. In fact, it reminds me, the $9 million figure... back when Tom Girardi was handling the case involving the gentleman who was beat up at Dodger Stadium. And I'd known Tom, and I knew the defense lawyer.
I think his name was Brian Stowe.
Right. And I know Dana Fox, who was probably the go-to insurance defense lawyer around. And what was reported in that case, for instance, is that they offered Stowe, before trial, a package that would have taken care of him and been in 9 figures, so would have broke the $10 million mark. If what is reported is true, I've never talked to Girardi about this, but they got a verdict, and the verdict seemed good. It was like $8 or $9 million, but obviously, if you knew that you would turn down 10, 12, or 15, it doesn't look so good. And I believe what ended up happening is Girardi had to waive his fees with Stowe so that Stowe didn't come after him, and basically got a zero.
Jussie Smollett.
Jussie is unbelievable in terms of, it gets me fired up. Gary had to call. Gary, did you have?
Yeah, we had a fun Saturday where Mark sent me stories over and over again all day, just trying to talk Jussie, and I was trying to send back other stories, and then sure enough, we talked Jussie.
And Gary's thing was, I said, Gary, I'm well aware and self-cognizant enough or self-reflective enough to know that this is going to ruin your Twitter game for a couple of weeks. And Gary, was I right?
Oh yeah, it's been a wild west over there. It
is just juicy. And I do call him Juicy, affectionately, because of Dave Chappelle. And I've told this story before, right?
Jussie Smollett?
Well, Jussie Smollett. But when I was watching the Dave Chappelle special, first he's talking about Michael Jackson, then he's talking about Cap, and then he goes into this French actor, and he's going, Jussie Smollett. I literally was so clueless that there was like a 40-second lag before I realized what he was talking about. And so I've teased Jussie ever since. And I went off on the Beyond because and by the way, Kim Fox, who is the prosecutor who was recused in that case, I've said all along that when I represented him on the first thing, we worked out a deal. He forfeited the $10,000. The case was dismissed. And that should have been the end of it, because that was double jeopardy. And people respond, they say, well, he wasn't in jeopardy, meaning the legal definition of jeopardy is you've either on a bench trial sworn a witness, or in a jury trial you've sworn a jury. And this was neither. But and the reason I bring up the $10,000 that he forfeited, there is a component of double jeopardy that is double punishment. If you're punished once, the government, it's been expanded so you don't get to come at him again. But the power structure in Chicago decided they were going to come after him again because it was embarrassing or whatever else. And this judge, and I'm not in front of him, and I will be very careful. I just think what he did was so over the top outrageous. Whether you hate Jussie or not, the idea that you're going to sit there and psychoanalyze him and you're going to remand him into custody immediately. And the reason he did that is he has a suspicion. This is where I'll psychoanalyze this judge in return. He has a suspicion that the appellate court is going to reverse him. And that this case is going to be reversed. If that happens, Jussie does not do any jail time. So his solution was, I'm going to remand him into custody, even though, as the judge said, this is one of the most prolific litigations he's ever had, and I'm going to slam him as, a narcissist and everything else. Then Jussie, to his discredit, starts yelling in the courtroom. I mean, if I had been there by his side, I probably would have done a Chris Brown where I would have said, "You don't talk, sit down." But I wasn't there, and he had a very able lawyer who was there, Nunya, and I just think you're going to see somewhere down the road that case will get reversed.
Right, but the appellate court, how many days? I mean, he got 150 days.
150 days.
When you get 150,
except he only has to serve 75.
Yeah,
in Illinois.
So 75, 150 days, so 2.5 months.
There's an emergency motion that the lawyer filed, legal team filed, that the Court of Appeal, they have an intermediate court, under the Supreme Court rules, has ordered a response by the Office of Special Prosecutor tomorrow. So this drops Tuesday. There's got to be a response tomorrow. They'll decide it on an expedited basis. By the way, once again, another angle of this case that I just find reprehensible is the idea of appointing a special prosecutor. This is basically a low-grade felony. In California, this would be a misdemeanor. And the idea of having a special prosecutor who's going to expend all kinds of resources in order to try this guy yet a second time and prosecute him a second time is just absurd.
Well, speaking of infamous clients or just famous clients, Kaepernick recently says he's in the best shape of his life, 34 years young, I guess.
Yeah, Gary, do you have that?
Get on with the team.
Yeah, you're an aficionado of the NFL.
Sure. Take
a look at this. And he was working out with Tyler Lockett, who is, Gary, one of the premier receivers in the league, is what I'm told.
Absolutely.
Seahawk, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And take a look at the tape here, because to my untrained eye, but I want to hear your impression here.
We're going to put it up in just a second here.
It's like 5 million views on one and 2 million views on the other. There's obviously a great interest in him, and it really is perplexing to me. The reason the Seattle is interesting is because Pete Carroll, former USC coach who's been Seattle for maybe 15 years or so?
It seems like it, maybe less.
At least a decade.
But at least a decade, yeah.
Oh, here it is, and then I'll kind of say why I think Tyler.
The Caps under the imaginary center, dropping back, throwing out, now dropping back, stretching a field over the middle, 15 yards, and now airing the ball out with a nice deep bomb post route, flag route, whatever they call it. Now an out, another out to the sideline.
Did you maybe have a future as Monday Night Football? Because, when they had Rush Limbaugh, he didn't last long, but you could.
Donovan McNabb's only in the league because he's black.
You remember that.
I do.
Yes.
The thing about all the prognosticators is, the haters are going 34. You can't be in the best shape of your life at 34 in the NFL. But then there's, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and guys who playing lights out at a slightly more advanced age. Look, the reality is you can make this argument pro and you can make this argument con. Like you can go, he's better than half the guys that are starting the league, and then the other part goes, you telling me with X amount of teams and a backup on each team, he's not in the top 60 of quarterbacks? And the answer is all of it is true. It's really about sort of fit and system and coach, and you can't. You'd be a fool to say this guy can't play, and you'd be a fool to say he needs to start for the Rams. It's just somewhat, the truth is somewhere in between. And the answer is there's so many cases of guys who played, who had lackluster years. Look, the Rams just won a Super Bowl with a guy who never won over 500 for his first, 12 years in the league or whatever.
And by the way, I mean, talk about a turnaround. And I watched right after the Super Bowl, I was on Flying Commercials. You'll be happy to hear that. Yeah. And watched the Kurt Warner story.
Yeah. I mean, look, you cannot. It's almost like saying that's a bad idea for a movie. The Lego movie was fantastic. If you would have told me we're making a movie about Legos, I would have told you, get the fuck out of my room.
Exactly. Isn't that funny? You want to hear the pitch? Well, you've done pitches before, right?
That's all I do.
Right?
Yeah, look, it's all in the execution, right? So there's no doubt that if he got with the right franchise, the right coach, and the right system, the right supporting cast.
Which is why I say Seattle. You don't have Russell Wilson. Pete Carroll, under oath, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been leaked because I'm under the NFL NDA, but Pete Carroll was deposed. Pete Carroll testified, and they leaked it, and he said that he was a starter in that league, and he did not want to. And I understand what Carroll's saying. I've got Russell Wilson. I'm not going to bring in something that's going to divide up the locker room, whatever, chemistry. But now you don't have Russell Wilson. So, okay, Pete, what happened? Were you stupid or liar? I guess I could do an Adam.
Well, the question really is the NFL, unlike other sports, baseball, sometimes even basketball, it's so much about team and chemistry and locker room and blah, blah, blah. Now, you can make an argument going to the right team is a morale booster, and going to the wrong team is going to create a distraction. And I think probably the number one thing head coaches don't want is a distraction.
Right.
They want all the gears to line up and everything to move in unison. It's the nature of the game. So the question is it's not that does he have the arm strength or does he have the 40 speed or does he have the ability to play in the NFL? That's a given. But there's 700 other guys that are home right now that also have physically the ability to play in the NFL. The question is what do they want for the team? Is there a distraction? Would the distraction be a plus in certain markets? There's a big difference between Dallas and Seattle in terms of the market. So what team would this be value added?
I just keep saying, to me, Seattle, the Raiders, you could even make a case for the Texans.
Deshaun Watson's gone.
Yeah. I mean, look, and by the way, people forget Colin won an award when he was at the 49ers for whatever you want to say, the best guy in the locker room or the most inspirational in the locker room. And I've seen him front row seat with teammates. Teammates are incredibly loyal to him. And by the way, he tweeted out, anybody want to play? And Tyler Lockett says, pick us up. Me and my brother are ready. I mean, he is a guy that he inspires camaraderie amongst players. I just think the owners have to get over it. And I used to say, well, and the NFL was, well, if we want to win, everybody wants to win. Well, the Brian Flores lawsuit seems to undercut that for Steve Ross in Miami, doesn't it? Because he was apparently paying, if you believe it's true, he was paying a bounty for losses.
Well, here's the last question for you, Mark, because you're uniquely qualified to answer this question. If Colin Kaepernick goes to a team, does he double down, for lack of a better term, on his stances and his opinions and his, take a knee and things of that nature? Or does he go to a team and go, I'm just going to fit in. I'm just one of the guys. I'll stand for the national anthem.
It's interesting because this was before the pandemic, so I'm going to guess 3 years ago, maybe 4. The time tends to meld. representing Eric Reed in his grievance, and that question was asked of Eric. And
DB
Eric,
for the Niners?
Then went and got signed right after the hearing that we did in Ohio. And Eric, I thought, had a great answer to that. It depends on the situation, and I'm perfectly willing to make a decision collaboratively. And I think that's all anybody can ask for. And I just don't the caricature and the polarization. The people whose heads explode about Colin, just the mere fact that he posts this. If you read, there's a good 10% of people whose heads explode about him, and that is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, what did he do that gets you so worked up?
Would they have that conversation?
I think they would.
The GM would go.
Yeah, I think a GM would say, "Look, we don't want to distract." I think they would, and I think Colin would have a reasoned discussion. What is it you're worried about? What is it that gives you pause? I just think that was what Eric said, and I haven't talked to Colin about it, but I would imagine that's what he would say too.
I got a joke.
Yeah,
I did it on stage the other night in KC, which was it was the Kaepernick TV show on HBO. When they did the thing where they went from the NFL combines to the slave auctions, and it was sort of comparing and contrasting the fact that it was akin, that the combines were akin to the slave auction. But I said, I see some similarities, but I think of a slave torn ACL, I don't think they would frantically rehab to get back out there. And I think that's kind of the difference for me,
Right.
I feel like I would nurse that injury for a little while.
I don't think I'm engaging. And I'll leave this to the comedy stylings of Adam.
I
Carolla.
get it.
Yeah.
You got a business to run.
I don't even know.
Football players need to make business decisions when they're going over the middle, and so is Mark Garagos.
Yeah,
We've been talking a lot lot about off-ramps lately. Maybe Reasonable Doubt needs one.
Let's just say at the end of this month, I've got a hearing with another NFL player who was injured, and it'll be very interesting because
don't tell him that joke.
Yeah, I'm not saying that joke, and I'll try to separate my comedic life from my legal life.
Please. All right, go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows. Maybe I'll tell that joke on stage in Indianapolis at Helium Comedy Club, May 6th and 7th. And you go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live stuff. What do you got, Mark?
Look, the hottest place in Palm Springs right now is Gigi's Restaurant.
You're going
there.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going. And at V Palm Springs, come by. If you can get in, it's we're doing gangbusters. So stop by. If you're in New York, stop by Prova at the Grand Central Terminal or the sister location at the Moxie Hotel in Times Square.
So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garagos saying Mahala.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.